Hello, nuts and nerds, and welcome back to a Squirrel Plays. Today we're going to be talking about the infamous shopping session in TTRPGs. And we're doing this because little did you know, I am actually a certified member of a super elite and prestigious group of dungeon tubers known as Dungeon Jam. Or at least I think that's their name. I'm honestly not sure. I just kind of walked in and started hanging out and nobody really questioned it. Anyway, they have a theme every so often where everybody makes a video based off that theme or idea, and they all get thrown into a giant playlist, so I thought I'd give it a whirl. The theme for August, yes, I know, I'm a day early, is stops and shops, and I got to thinking about it for like 2 whole seconds before I started getting a swarm of ideas. But then I remembered hearing lots of people talk bad about the shopping sessions that tend to happen in TTRPGs, so I thought, hey, let's talk about some ways we can make that more interesting because that's helpful, right? So what I'd like to do today is go over a few complaints I saw crop up several times during my research. Part 1 will be the complaint, there is no dice rolling. Part 2 will be the complaint, there is nothing to do. And Part 3 will be the complaint that there is no roleplay. I had more, but the video got too long. This ended up being a really fun topic that I would have loved to make a much lengthier video on, but YouTube doesn't like it when I don't upload regularly. So grab your bags and let's go shopping. When I see this complaint, it makes me think that somebody is just taking the inventory list from the manual and handing it to the players and asking what they want to buy. And if you do that, well, of course there isn't going to be any dice rolling.
This is big brain time.
I'm not going to say this is a perfect solution, but something I did in one of my campaigns was make a shop inventory minigame, which, granted, was a little easier to do because it was a reoccurring shop they got to visit repeatedly, but more on that later. I had some tables of inventory that I had made up with a lot of junk and filler items, some basic and not so basic consumables, basic armor and weapons, and then some rare and magic items. When the players showed up to that shop for the day, they rolled up the inventory to see what was in stock, and they could do 1 re-roll for free. If they saw an item they liked but didn't have the money, they could lock that item in place as long as they wanted, but only 1 item could be locked at a time. If they wanted to do more rerolls on the inventory, they had to spend their money on each reroll. Basically playing a slot machine, right? And I'll admit, this infinite rotating stock might not make sense in every situation and setting, but it gives the players some rolling to do and can be a fun little minigame. If you want something that makes more sense, but still includes a minigame of sorts with the dice rolling, then make haggling more interesting than a 1-roll charisma check. Let's say there's an item for 100 gold or whatever your chosen currency is. You can drop the price in increments of 5, but each increment requires a contested dice roll against the shopkeeper. It starts off easy enough, but every increment you do gives the shopkeeper more and more bonuses to his roll because it's getting harder and harder and harder to convince him to come down more. Additionally, to make it more interesting, a failed roll could set you back 2 or 3 increments, adding risk to each attempt you take. And of course, this would be a good way for each character to use their profession or backstory. A warrior trying to buy a new sword might be able to point out a few defects on the weapon to get some bonuses to his first roll. The whole party could get in on it if they wanted to, which might lead to the shopkeeper signaling for a guard if he starts to feel a little bit ganged up on. The guard wouldn't attack the players, but he might hang around to make sure everything is all right, giving the shopkeeper a massive boost to his haggling rolls. You might not get a lot of adventuring done that day, but I'm pretty sure your players are going to be invested in trying to save their hard-earned money. And the best part is that isn't limited to just the bard in your party. Each and every player gets to participate and try the haggling minigame.
It's fun to stay at the YMCA. It's fun to stay at the YMCA.
We already talked about some new dice rolling and minigames we could do, so this might sound a little bit redundant, but I wanted to point out to the GMs that think there is nothing to do in these sessions that this is a fantastic time to check in and do some balancing. And by that, I mean check in and see what the players are lacking. What do they need? What do they want? Oh, I know what they want. They want to like and subscribe. Now, before I go any further, I will say if you're running a game that is supposed to be difficult and the players are supposed to struggle, or you're just one of those GMs that like to make your players miserable because you're sad and lonely, then most of this probably will not apply. Quick and easy example is you, the GM, have realized that your party is struggling to keep their HP in a good spot. Players are constantly going down and having to get picked back up because they're just not able to get the heals out well enough. You've tried adjusting your encounters, but the party just seems to have a little bit of a kink in it that isn't synergizing very well. Well, looky there, wouldn't you know it? The shop is currently running a bulk discount on health potions. Fancy that. Or maybe your party tried to be prepared and brought a healer along, and for some reason or another, the heals just aren't coming out that great. The next shop conveniently has a snazzy new staff of healing that buffs up the healing output. Now, hats off to you for noticing on your own what the party is needing. But it's also a good time to ask them how they're doing. What do they feel like they're lacking? Are they enjoying their class choices? Good example of this was in the first campaign I ran, somebody was playing a monk. They were really enjoying their character and they enjoyed their class well enough, but they had been getting in a few encounters where a lot of ranged attacks were getting tossed back and forth and, well, the monk wasn't able to do much while everybody else could. Granted, this came from a quest reward and not a shop item, but the same logic applies. I gave her a new ability. For the cost of so many key points, all of her melee attacks for the remainder of the encounter became ranged attacks with a limited distance. It wasn't a mechanical balance choice, it was more of a are you having fun balance, because sitting back while others got to shoot wasn't exactly fun for her. On the other hand, and I know I've mentioned this before, our good buddy Crig can't roll dice to save his life. Mechanically, his character should have not only been fine, but doing the higher ends of damage. But because Crig is Crig, most of his rolls were just straight up garbage through no fault of his own. So I sold him a weapon that always, no matter what, rolled with advantage. You'd think that would have made a significant difference, but it was barely noticeable the way he rolled. So take note, you can't fix everyone's problems. And since we've checked in on balance and fun, it's also worth mentioning that it's good to check in on the narrative side of things. Does a player have some backstory or personal quests that need to be explored? A shopkeeper could have loads of rumors to help out in that regard. Even if they didn't have a rumor to directly help, they could request the party's help for something simple that leads to bigger and better things. For example, shopkeeper wants some bear pelts and tells you where you might find a bear or two. You go to the location, find a cave, kill a bear, and ho-ho, what's that? There's the corpse of a dead bandit, as opposed to the corpse of a live bandit, because that totally makes sense. And on said bandit is some strange leather armor. Egads, one of the players say. I recognize this bandit's attire. They were the same bandits that raided my village and killed the love of my life, which made me become the over-dramatic rogue that stands before you. I don't know what that was, but my point is perhaps on the body is a note or something that suggests these bandits are nearby, and now you have a whole quest to go on and explore that character's backstory.
Love stinks.
Alright, so this is where I was tempted to make an entire video about just making interesting NPCs for shopkeepers, but I felt like I'd already done something similar to that in the past. I'm probably preaching to the choir anyway when I talk about giving your shopkeeper some more history and background, but what about treating their shop as its own character? And you know what? Believe it or not, I'm going to use D&D as a good example. I know the world's coming to an end. I read about this in the Dragon Heist Adventure module, but that's probably not the only place it's mentioned. Old Zoblob's shop, and I can't remember if that was the owner's name or what, but y'all probably know what I'm talking about. Everything in his shop, or at least according to the Dragon Heist module, is purple. And I mean everything. Such an interesting shop can lead the players to ask questions, which opens the door for more roleplay. I won't go into the details, but when I got thrown into a GMing position, I tried to run this module. When the party came across the shop, they were naturally interested in it purely from the description I had given them from the book. I made the guy running it a bit of an obsessed lunatic, which might have been implied or encouraged by the module. I honestly cannot remember. What I'm pretty sure was my idea, though, was that I had him put a little tag on every single item in his shop. The tags were item numbers that had 3 letters and 3 numbers. There was no discernible method to it, just random letters and numbers seemingly, but it was how he kept up with everything, and he had it all completely memorized because to him it made perfect sense. And when a party member found a strange gemstone with no tag on it, that of course raised some questions, which led to a whole other quest line specifically designed for one of the players. But had I treated that shop as just a list to hand the players, none of that would have happened. The shop itself is a character of sorts. It's interesting. You can look through the window and see that every blessed thing in there was purple, which would understandably raise some eyebrows. Likewise, that shop I mentioned earlier with the rotating inventory minigame had its own interesting things going on. For starters, it was in a place that the party wasn't even supposed to go, so it already felt a little special. See, in that campaign, the party had this wizard tower essentially that was their base, and it was teleporting them to different areas that they dialed into. There was a little bit of a mechanical mishap, and the thing dialed into a place they weren't exactly supposed to go, and they ended up in a swamp with a shop run by alligator people. In other words, they got teleported to New Orleans.
Pick up something you do like that. If that water wet, it's got gators in it. That's how you know they got gators in that water in Louisiana.
It was a bonus level of sorts, a secret area. And running the shop was this huge alligator creature that was a retired adventurer. Leo, I think his name was. And hanging out in his shop most of the time were his 3 alligator buddies who were there strictly for giggles, but the whole group worked as one to make the shop feel special. And I really hate to say this, guys, but I could not remember their names. There was a super muscular dude, the short and fat smart guy, and then basically the toothless hillbilly. And yes, I'm about 99% sure at least one of them was named Bubba. But because this was a new location they could dial into whenever they wanted, they all became reoccurring faces. When they walked in and saw the smart guy trying to play chess with the hillbilly, it was a funny scene for them because they had gotten to know those characters. But also, the roleplay is a two-way street. You can't force the players into it. As the GM, the most you can do is try to make the NPCs and their shop interesting and hope for the best.
It's the end of the world as we know it.
Ladies and gents, that's about all I got. Well, not really. That's a huge lie. I have a ton more I could add to this, but that's all we're going to get in this video. There were more shops and things I wanted to talk about, but time is precious. And speaking of time, if you're watching this the day it comes out, I'll be at Gen Con. I'll be there all weekend, actually, meeting and greeting with some of you fine folks. I'll finally get to meet that big loser Peter. It's going to be wild, man. I've never been to one of these things before, so here's hoping I made it there in one piece. Anyway, shout out to Dungeon Jam for putting these things together. They're a lot of fun, but I don't always get to participate due to my release schedule. Hope you guys got something useful out of this, and if I don't see you at Gen Con, then I'll see you in the next video. And I'm out!